events that would have taken place in Guyana over the past week or so. And as is the norm, we always have a packed agenda of issues to discuss. Tonight is no different. I want to begin by welcoming all of our viewers who are joining us on television from West Coast Berbice, Region number 5. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. To our viewers on television again who are joining us from Region number 6 across the Berbice River on the east bank of the Berbice River, New Amsterdam, Kanji, along the Quarantine Coast and all the way to Sipa Ruta and Oriala. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And last but not least, to the thousands of you who are joining us on Facebook Live right across the length and breadth of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And as I would normally say, please share this program, share the live, press that share button on your phone, on your computer, on your iPad, or whatever device that you are using to view the program. Use the comment section as well for us to exchange our views. As I said, I always would like to engage you. I don't want to have a one-way conversation. So whatever question you want me to answer, whatever issues you want me to address, I will try my best to glance at the screen of the phone while I am speaking to you, to look at the comment section so that I can respond to the issues that you would like me to address. Again, please share the program. I see Vijay Lacha, Dudnot, Bharat Ruplal, Anet Singh, Sital Prasad, Parmanan Shivnot, Stanley Ramsaran, Mike Brass. So many of you are looking. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. So, the government's decision to issue cash grant to every Guyanese 18 years and over who is in our registration system has been met with criticisms first, and when it was realized that the criticisms were unfounded, the criticisms were obviously baseless, and these criticisms were rejected by the general populace. The opposition, rather than accept that it's a good decision, has found all manner of methods to detract from the decision. They have found all manner of method to criticize the decision, while at the same time, some of them are fighting to take ownership of the decision. So, as usual, they are a confused bunch. I have listened to the WPA, this group that is calling themselves the WPA, a few persons, not numbering about 10, scattered all over the world, a few of them living here. A shadow of what the WPA stood for and was at the time it was conceived by Walter Rodney. But this bunch, who has really degenerated into an ethnic cabal that continue relentlessly to sow the seeds of division in our country. This bunch is fighting to take ownership of this, what they're calling direct cash transfer. You know, these people like these sophisticated uh, labels, and they speak about this giving out of the money as though it was some earth-shattering idea that they came up with, that it's some very innovative and novel concept for which they are claiming ownership. And when you listen to what they say about this concept, which they're calling direct cash transfer, of course, they've put a sophisticated label to it to package it intellectually. You would think that this thing is some sort of a concept that some great mental effort would have had to have been expended in coming up with this idea. My friends, sharing out money is the easiest thing for anyone to do. Sharing out money is the easiest thing for anyone to do. But these guys are clamoring to take ownership of this idea as though it is some grand economic precept and concept that they originated. And you know, when Professor Clive Thomas did speak about it in Boxton, and the truth of the matter is, the coalition government of which he was a part rejected it out of hand. President David Granger rejected it. The finance minister at the time rejected it. And it was never implemented. I myself had expressed criticism against it. Why? Guyana just got oil money. We actually, at the time when Professor Thomas spoke about it, I don't think we had received a cent yet. Guyana is a poor, impoverished state comparatively. We have so much to do in the public health sector, in the water sector, in the housing sector, in the education sector, to bring us on par with modern civilization and on par with the rest of the Caribbean. And here it is, we didn't even receive a cent yet from the oil money, and Clive Thomas was speaking about giving out the money. $1 million a year or something like that. No scientific analysis, nothing. We didn't even receive the money. If you have so much to do in a country, you're now getting money for the first time, would you not use that money to start to build out your infrastructure, to bring your country up to some degree, some standard? To bring it in keeping with the rest of at least the region in which you're living? And the WPA was advocating for the sharing out of the money even before we received a cent. And in that context, personally speaking, I was critical of it. Now, over 7 years after, you have a different situation. You're building out the infrastructure that I'm speaking about. And we have been doing that for the past 4 years. Now you are in a position in which you can make decisions of that type. At that time, it would have been premature and perhaps a bad decision to make, to distribute the first tranche of money you get from the oil sector. Just share it out. So now we are distributing it. Now we have settled down. You now have an idea of how much inflows you have. You have an idea of how much you can spend on infrastructure. And you have an idea now that you can cushion cost of living effects with cash transfer. And it is against that backdrop that our government has decided to do it. And we are doing it. Now they come up with another sophisticated call. They want it now to be made into legislation. I don't understand. What are you making into legislation? Giving out cash grant to guides, you're making that into law? But, calling for legislation is another sophisticated concept. Apparently it makes them sound intellectual and it makes them sound profound. That's the only reason I could advance. We have been distributing cash grant for school children 15 years now, since 2010 or 2011. We didn't put that in legislation. We have been distributing uniform vouchers and subsidies for uniform. We never put that in legislation. We have been giving subsidies to pensioners in respect of their electricity and water bills for more than a decade now. We didn't put that in legislation. Why you want to put this in legislation? You want to make this the law of the country? What will happen if next year we don't get the money to pay? Why you want to make that law? I have never seen, you don't make law for the purpose of making law, putting something into law that should not be the subject of laws. Laws is to govern and regulate society. So you put it into law and then next year, for whatever reason, oil prices drop because oil prices depend upon a volatile world market and you are unable to pay. So what happens? You violate your own law. And how do you know that you want to continue doing this every year? And what sum will be next year, or you want to amend the law every time? Is it, suppose you want to give less because you can't afford, or suppose you want to give more because you can afford. You go and you amend the law again? And so no one has come up with a sensible reason why you must put it in law. But there is this huge call for legislation. And that's what I'm saying, is these people like another form. So they find a fancy name for it. Direct cash transfer. Now they want legislation. You see the labels, the form, the pageantry, that is what they're good for. What is important is that the people are receiving the cash grant, or they will receive the cash grant. That is what is important. And that is what the people want. They don't want it in the form of legislation. And as I said, why put it into law? When you put it into law, there is rigidity. There is no, you have lost flexibility because the law will now dictate your policy. Why you can't have it as a flexible policy, as we have with the cash grant, that we have increased significantly every single year? That is not law. And the thing is that they claim they believe so much in this direct cash transfer, yet when they were in the opposition, they terminated the cash grant. That is direct cash transfer too. The cash grant was a direct cash transfer, to use your big word or your big phrase. But when they got into government, they abolished it. They promised when they were in the opposition that they will reduce tuition fees at the university. Recall that? And what did they do? They increased it by nearly 80%. They increased tuition fees by 80% at the university. We are now making it free. We are now making it free. That is another form of direct cash transfer. We are paying for tens of thousands of scholarships at various universities across the world under the Gold Scholarship Program. That is direct cash transfer as well. Thousands of people are benefiting from an education that the government is paying millions and millions of dollars to various universities across the globe. That is direct cash transfer. That is not in legislation. The abolition of the fees at the University of Guyana, that is not in legislation. What is magical about putting $100,000 gift or cash transfer into legislation? They just want to come up with something and they're demanding that we implement it. Well, if they win the election next time, they will implement it. We are not going to do that. It doesn't make sense at no level. At no level does it make sense. And as I'm on the free education issue, of course they take ownership of that as well. And I said that's Barnum idea of free education from nursery to university. Now Barnum did say so. First of all, Barnum didn't invent that. But when you hear him speak, it's as if Barnum came up with that idea. Barnum is the first man since the history of civilization who came up with free education from nursery to university. What they are refusing to tell you is what damage that policy of Barnum did to the entire country and to the education system of the country. They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that because of that policy, Barnum destroyed the entire education system of the country. They're not going to tell you that. Destroyed the University of Guyana as well. Bankrupted the whole country because of harebrained policies like that. Harebrained policies like that, sorry. Now we can afford it. And that's a simple reason, a simple principle that these people don't understand. That you must cut your coat according to your cloth. You must spend within your affordable means. They don't understand those concepts. Barnum, the country could not have afforded free education from nursery to university. We could not have afforded it. But Burnham implemented the policy and he bankrupted the country. Children were fainting in the schools because they didn't have food. And that is the type of legacy that they have. Now we are implementing it because we can afford it. We put back, it's the PPP government that brought tuition fees back into the education system, at least at the university, because the university would have collapsed. It was not feasible to run it free. Now we can afford it, and now we are doing it, and we are doing much more. We are doing much more. We have a gold scholarship program that is not comparable with any in the region. The most expansive scholarship program ever seen in the English-speaking Caribbean is the Gold Scholarship Program. And we didn't implement it when we couldn't. We implemented it when we could have afforded it. And that is the difference. Sustainability. You're not doing things for political gimmick, and you're making promises. Like they said that they will give $400,000 as cash grant. 400,000. They had to do something. They had to say something better. I was telling somebody, we are lucky they didn't say $1 million. Because they don't think, they don't calculate. Last year, as I've pointed out, and I believe the Vice President has made the point repeatedly, we got $350 billion that we draw down from the Natural Resources Fund. $350 billion. The budget for two of our ministries, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. Just take two. The combined budget of those two ministries alone was more than $350 billion. But you hear Nigel Hughes, who obviously you know that he doesn't know maths. You hear him calculating that we're earning $650 million per day. I don't know where the hell he get that figure from. And he's not explaining. But he keep repeating that foolishness all over the place. And of course, when he does it, it's very intelligent, very sophisticated, very suave. But beneath all of that, beneath that veneer, there's no substance. There's no substance to what they say. So I thought I would begin with that. As you know, again, the Caribbean Court of Justice gave a very important ruling in a case filed by Christopher Jones, in which he sought to prohibit two parliamentary secretaries, Vikash Ramkissoon and Sarah Brown, from participating in sitting in the National Assembly. And he succeeded in the High Court and in the Court of Appeal. Both courts felt that they were bound by a decision of Scott and Felix against the Attorney General. You will recall that I filed Scott and Felix, and I was able to persuade both the High Court and the Court of Appeal that these two technocratic ministers could not sit in the Parliament. They couldn't be appointed technocratic ministers because they are from the list of candidates. And I won the case. They took my very arguments because there's similar provisions, almost identical provisions of the Constitution that apply to parliamentary secretary and they apply to technocrat ministers. So they followed my case and they filed this case against Brown and Ramkisoon. And I argued the opposite this time around. And lawyers are entitled to change their arguments. I argued the opposite. I felt that I was wrong before. And I corrected myself, but of course they overruled me. They were more concerned, the judges that I'm speaking about, they were more concerned about me arguing one thing in opposition and arguing another thing in government. They were more concerned about that rather than look at what I'm saying. I argued before different courts. And they are saying that you can't argue one thing when you're in government and another thing when you're in opposition. Of course I can do that. Lawyers argue both sides all the time. And we went all the way to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And our arguments prevailed. But what is worrying is the alarming rate of reversal which is taking place at the level of the Court of Appeal of Guyana and the Caribbean Court of Justice. I have spoken about this several times, and it must be a cause for worry. In certain types of cases, as I pointed out repeatedly, there is a 100% reversal. The Court of Appeal rules one way, the CCJ overrules them in a particular category of cases. And in other cases, the rate of reversal is not much different. Is not much different. This is a worrying issue. And as Minister with responsibility for justice, it is my duty to voice these concerns. While we have, I believe, successfully addressed the backlog in the High Court, and cases are moving swiftly in the High Court and are being disposed of swiftly in the High Court, for which I must give credit to the judiciary, in particular the High Court judges, led by the Chief Justice. We have now developed an unfortunate bottleneck or backlog at the level of the Court of Appeal. The cases are being disposed of by the High Court, and there is now a large backlog accumulated at the Court of Appeal. Now, granted, we have 3 judges sitting, and that may be an explanation as to why, but it can't be a justification. I know that the Judicial Service Commission is currently looking to fill and working to fill the vacancies that are now extant at the Guyana Court of Appeal. Hopefully we will get appointments and there will be greater speed in the disposal of cases. But lawyers will tell you, and I speak to lawyers and I speak to litigants, that there is now a great delay in having their appeals heard. I was speaking to lawyers from Berbice recently, and people are dying, people are migrating, their properties are deteriorating, and the appeals are not coming up for hearing. So that's something that we have to address very, very urgently. I see some interesting statements being made in the public domain by the Private Sector Commission or a representative of the Private Sector Commission regarding corruption. And corruption is always an issue that excites discussions. So they speak about corruption in both the private sector and the public sector, and corruption exists in both sectors. But as Attorney General, I can assure you that every day our government is working on addressing corruption. The Vice President has gone countrywide to speak and spoke about procurement irregularities and have announced steps that the government is taking to address procurement irregularities and possibilities of corruption in that sector. Government has established a unit at the Attorney General Chambers to review contractual breaches and to implement liquidated and other forms of penalties when there is breach of contract. Billions of dollars in liquidated damages have already been imposed. Several major contracts have been terminated. At the level of the anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism framework, a lot of work is ongoing. A lot of investigations are ongoing in relation to corruption. That framework has unearthed Calvin Brutus, an assistant commissioner of police, and he is now before the court facing dozens of charges with, I'm told, 200 more to come. And more persons will be charged in relation to that fraud. The files are still being reviewed by the DPP because there are so many in numbers. Policemen, public servants are being charged on a regular basis in relation to fraud and corruption. At the level of the Deeds and Commercial Registry, I have enacted a series of amendments to the Powers of Attorney Act, to the Deeds Registry Act, to protect against corruption and fraud. For the longest while, I have not heard an allegation of corruption at the Deeds and Commercial Registry, where allegations were being made on a regular basis. That is because of the systems we have put in place. Legislatively, we have passed dozens of pieces of legislation. Historically, for example, the Public Procurement Act, and recently to address the issue of corruption in the public sector. So it is an ongoing work in progress. Corruption will not evaporate, but I have repeatedly said to people that a corrupt transaction involves two persons. If you don't offer a bribe, the other person can't take the bribe. We have established hotlines for persons to make reports of corrupt practices. So it's not that work is not being done in this regard, and work will continue to be done. Corruption will have to be an ongoing fight. But we have to also look in the private sector as well. There are a lot of irregularities taking place in the corporate environment that we are concerned about. I have seen monies in bank accounts without it being flagged. Millions passing through bank accounts. We have a case in the court where James Bond had $1 million US deposited in his account, and that didn't raise a red flag. When the ordinary man goes, when I go to deposit money, I have to show source of funds, etc. Not that I'm objecting. That's the law, once you pass a certain threshold. But then you have, when we were in the opposition, James Bond with $100 million, $200 million in his account. And that, the commercial banks didn't pick that up. In the very Brutus case, how all these monies were allowed to be deposited. Then you have allegations of, in the private corporate sector as well, about unfair advantage being taken of minority shareholders. So we have to look at the macro framework and work towards addressing these issues. We are working right now on a new Companies Act, a CARICOM model. A CARICOM model, which we will implement possibly next year. We have to consult it. A lot of consultations have been completed with the private sector, with the chartered accountants, with the Bar Association, with the banking sector, where companies will also be held. Private companies will be held to a higher standard. But it's good that these discussions are taking place in the public domain. As I am on the issue of legislation, we have a trustee bill that we have just completed in draft, and it will go out for consultation. The law of trust in Guyana is governed by a 1893 English Trustees Act. And trust is a very important legal instrument in the commercial architecture of a country. One of the criticisms leveled against Guyana as a jurisdiction in our mutual evaluation assessment by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force is that we don't have a modern statutory framework regulating trusts and activities in relation to trusts. And trust is a vehicle that can be used to perpetrate illicit activities and hide monies, etc. So it's a mechanism that the anti-money laundering framework scrutinizes. In the rest of the Caribbean, you have modern trust laws governing the establishment, operationalization of trusts, and how trusts are managed and how investments are done with monies that are left in trust, and how properties are to be disposed of that are left in trusts, and so on. So and there's a huge gap in our legal system. So we are working to correct that gap as well. We have the Oil Pollution Prevention, Preparedness and Response Bill, which, as you know, we have spoken about this bill at length. It's a bill drafted by US consultants and sent to us here, commissioned by us obviously, with policy directives, and we are now going through the bill. It's a consultative effort. Many important stakeholders are playing a part in reviewing the bill, and once the review is completed, the bill will be taken to Parliament. We are hoping that we can do so by the end of the year. This is November already. We may not be able to meet that deadline because of the type of consultation which we may have to continue to do, because the bill is quite modern, it's quite involved, it embraces a number of sectors and lays out a role for a number of regulatory agencies to collaborate, and obviously it establishes a very important governance structure and sets up mechanisms within the bill to hear and determine claims in relation to oil spill. So you will hear more about that very shortly. The Attorney General Chambers and the Deeds and Commercial Registry will do another public outreach, this time in region number 7, on the November the 11th and the 12th, We will also have with us the Director of Restorative Justice. So we will have this public engagement where persons from Bartica and outlying areas, the Tushaus and the business community of Bartica will be engaged. The entire Deeds and Commercial Registry staff will be there, and all the services that that agency offers will be made available to Region 7. And pursuant to a promise made by His Excellency Dr. Mohabir, we will establish a branch of the Deeds and Commercial Registry Office in the town of Bartica. So Barticians, and Bartica is the gateway to the interior. So persons who are in that locality and beyond will not have to travel to Georgetown to transact their business. If they buy and sell property, they can do that, their transfer of their conveyance, passing of the transport, etc., right at Bartica. If they want to incorporate companies, they can do it there. They want to register their business, renew their registration, they can do it right there. They want to do deed polls, file any form of deeds, it can be done there. They want to register, I said businesses, etc. All these filing of power of attorneys, all these services will now be available permanently in region number 7. So that will not only be available to Barticians, but to the entirety of region number 7, and more importantly, the outlying areas. So that will take place on November the 11th and the 12th, and we will do a restorative justice public awareness engagement, because Bartica has a court, a magistrate's court, and we would like restorative justice services to be available in that court as well. We will align the restorative justice center with the probation department, so the probation officers and the restorative justice officers will work together in offering services to the magistrate in resolving minor matters that are capable of resolution under the Restorative Justice Act. This is a form of alternative dispute resolution of small criminal matters that do not carry imprisonment and is not of a violent nature. There is no need for the courts to spend valuable time dealing with these matters. And restorative justice is one of the modern ways, one of the socially oriented mechanisms to deal with small minor offenses and to permanently repair the damage that crime causes between persons, the victim and the perpetrators. I mean, I've spoken so much about this, I don't wish to repeat it again here. Tomorrow, again, the election fraud cases will be called before this new magistrate. We know that the previous magistrate who had conduct of the matter has finally relinquished conduct of the matter, and good sense has prevailed, and the matter is now assigned to a new magistrate. I am told that this new magistrate tomorrow we'll do a case management seminar and we'll fix time frames in respect of how the trials will proceed. As you know, the trials are going to be done de novo, meaning start from the beginning. Fortunately, a lot of work has not yet been done in the trials, so it's not a lot to start over. I believe just one witness concluded giving evidence and one was in the witness box when the proceedings were halted before the magistrate before whom they were pending. The important thing, though, is that we have to ensure that these cases are proceeded with alacrity. I heard today Aubrey Norton, the leader of the opposition, saying that the charges against Mingo and Lowenfield, etc., are trumped-up charges. Can you believe that? Can you believe that the leader of the opposition of this country is saying that the charges against these persons who are in the magistrate's court in respect of the elections are trumped-up charges? Well, it pleases me when I hear statements like that come from the leader of the opposition and the opposition, because it demonstrates to you where they stand, because you know what happened, you saw what happened, and that is the beauty of this elections, the 2020 elections. You don't have to listen to me or the PPP. You just have to listen, look back at the clips, and that's the beauty of technology. Look back at the clips. They're right on your Facebook. It's all there, it's fresh in your memory. What they tried to do. All the observers condemn them. The former Prime Minister of Jamaica said it was the most transparent attempt he has seen at altering an election result. And it must take a brave mind to do so in the face of such sturdy paper trail. I'm quoting the man almost verbatim. That is what the gentleman said. The most transparent attempt to fraudulently alter an election. There's a man who saw it, who was here observing. And when you get the time, just look or try to read what Mr. President David Granger's son-in-law said about the opposition's conduct. Gaskin. Read what Gaskin said. I was reading it the other day. And here it is, Nigel Hughes, the anointed leader of the AFC. He wants to know what is there for them to apologize for. Well, that is the kind of approach. Once they adopt it, they will never ever come close to the doors of government. Let them continue along that line. You have to encourage them to continue along that line, because the international community is looking. The voter is looking. The ambassadorial community is looking. They saw what happened. And these guys who are pretending to be Democrat doesn't know, Nigel Hughes doesn't know what went wrong and what he did wrong. In fact, he says, you heard him? He was not in the business. The reporter asked a very simple question. You are now the leader of the AFC. You are now the leader of the AFC. The AFC contested the elections 2020. You wouldn't ask to see the statements of poll up to now. Your wife was a minister in the government. Your wife was a minister of the government. You are a former chairman of the party. The party contested the last elections. The party claimed that it won the elections. Your party leader, Kemraj Ramjatan, gave a farewell speech that he won the elections. He gave a farewell speech according to him. He said it was a farewell speech he gave at Home Affairs Ministry. Your party is claiming that they won the election. You wouldn't ask one day to look at the statements of poll. And he says in this very arrogant and haughty way, I am not in the business. I am not in the business of reviewing statements of poll. Well, let them take that same approach. When you don't want to accept the fraud that your party attempted to commit and want to mount a horse of morality, you will fall, and you will fall hard. That is my little lesson as we close. I want to thank you very much for spending the last hour with me. We have had a good program. I will see you next week. Until we meet again, please stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.